If any man lacks wisdom, let him ask of God who gives liberally. So you ask God, God can give you wisdom. But what do you do with that wisdom? You're not going to get that without gaining understanding. And the way you gain understanding is meditating on the things that God has already spoke to you, applying what you've meditated on, and you'll get even greater levels of understanding. A lot of people stop at wisdom because wisdom is easy enough to get. And you think you have everything you need when you have wisdom. But in all you're getting, make sure you get understanding.
Welcome to Kingdom Over Everything. I am your host and Chief Fire Igniter, Shae Bynes. And I have back with me my dear husband, Phil Bynes, of almost 25 years. He's also the CEO of Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur and also a massage therapist of like 20 something years. And so Phil does a lot of things. And he's also a wonderful, wonderful person, I must say. How's it going, babe?
It's going well. I'm glad you decided to have a Phil Bynes takeover for on your show.
Yes, this week we get to share all kinds of Phil Bynes, all kinds of Phil Bynes. All right, so it was inevitable that we would have this discussion at some point on Kingdom Over Everything because what we're about to talk about is something that comes up probably, and I don't think I'm exaggerating, at least once a week in the Bynes household. Something connected to this topic will come up. In fact, unlike most episodes that I have no idea, what the topic is going to be called or, what I'm going to call it or whatever, this one, I was like, this is going to be called Don't Stop with Wisdom, Get Understanding. So Phil, let's just kind of dig in here. I mean, because this is something that I know in the kingdom, we work with people all the time, especially in the context of business or leaders of ministries or all types of things. And there is definitely, wisdom is a wonderful thing and we need it. The Bible tells us to get wisdom. In fact, one of my favorite scriptures is James 1:5. And it's one of your favorite ones too, in terms of the fact that if any man lacks wisdom, let him ask God. He gives it to us generously without finding fault in us for asking, right? And so there's so much goodness to wisdom, but almost every week we end up having a conversation about how the problem is that too many people stop at wisdom and don't seek understanding. So I'm going to give you the floor to just start this conversation however you want to start it, because this is something that's hot on your heart and your mind on a regular basis.
So I would just like to start with reading some scripture, right?
Let's do
And we're
it.
going to be in Proverbs 4, and that's the only place we're going to be for this discussion. So I'm going to
Proverbs
start with
4.
Proverbs 4, verse 1,
Okay.
and then I'm going to jump to verse 5 and go through 9, right?
Okay.
So it says, "Listen, my son, to a father's instruction. Pay attention and gain understanding. Get wisdom, get understanding. Do not forget my words or turn away from them. Do not forsake wisdom, and she will protect you. Love her, and she will watch over you. The beginning of wisdom is this: get wisdom. And though it costs you all you have, get understanding. Cherish her, and she will exalt you. Embrace her, and she will honor you. She will give you a garland to grace your head and present you with a glorious crown." Right? And so we see that like understanding is mentioned here, wisdom is mentioned here, and is and I think what people do a lot of times is they tangle the two things up. Like, okay, if I have wisdom, I have understanding, you know, and that's not how this thing works. I the way I look at understanding is a multiplier, right? And so understanding is going to multiply whatever you've already gained in the kingdom, right? You need to gain knowledge. Understanding will work on that knowledge for you. You gain wisdom, understanding will work on the wisdom. You can't apply understanding to something that you don't know. You can't apply understanding to wisdom that you haven't gained, right? And so understanding is that finishing piece that I think a lot of people stop short of.
Okay, so for those who are tangling them up together, they might have heard that and said, well, I still don't understand the difference. So, can you walk through a practical example of that? You can either take an example from your own life, or something you commonly deal with because you mentor and advise people and have conversations with folks all the time. So take us through an
I
example.
Well, what I'll do is, instead of taking through an example up front, I want to use an illustration, right?
Okay.
Instead. So a map, right? You see a map and it has these data points on maps, right? So if I'm looking at a map and I see this squiggly line here and I see this there and I see how these things connect, those are all data points. That's like knowledge, right? If you don't know what those squiggly lines mean, you don't understand what the squiggly line mean, then you don't have a way to fully apply that knowledge, right? And the wisdom part is, okay, if you do have that, let's think you have the wisdom is an answer key that's on a map. So you got these squiggly lines, you got all these data points. Wisdom is a little box that says this squiggly line means this. This means this data point. That means that, right? And so now if you can turn around and look at all those things and gain understanding from the whole picture, understanding what those data points mean, then that's like your understanding working on the wisdom that you just got. Oh, this is a river. Oh, okay, I know how a river. Oh, so if the river was flowing like this, that means that it's converging here. It's like your understanding gets to work on the new clearer picture of wisdom. And so that's what I mean when I say that understanding has to be applied to knowledge and wisdom, right? And so let me try to.
Wait, hold on a second. Hold on. It took me actually a second to capture your illustration because it's been so long since I've actually looked at a physical map that has a key. Some people who are watching this don't even know what you're talking
Oh,
about because they've never seen a physical map with a key. It actually took me a second because I'm on Google
uh-huh.
Maps and all these other things. I'm like, what is he talking about? So for those who don't know,
Okay. We'll
for
try
those who
another
don't
one.
know, there are these old school, and they still exist, physical maps. And in there, you have this key that shows you what the symbols on the map represent. And that's what Phil was walking us through. Is if you're just looking at it, you've got data points, but until you see that answer key and see what the symbols represent, that's giving you the wisdom that for you to know, okay, this is how I apply these little symbols to what I'm seeing on this map. And then understanding would be what in this case? I just want to make sure we brought them all together.
So
Brought us all together. What would
understanding in this
understanding be?
case would be enough understanding of what a river is. You have to understand what a river is. You can see a word that says that's river. So that's your understanding working on the knowledge, right? And all those pieces together, making the fullness of a map, and you understand, okay, this is a map of this state or whatever it is, and this is how all these things connect. That would be your understanding working on the wisdom that you just got, right?
Okay, gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. Okay, good. All right. So are you okay with giving a example, or do I need to give an
You give
example?
an example first, and I'll work on mine.
Okay. All right. So in our world where we have a lot of people who God's given them messages to deliver, God's given them if they're like a service provider or something, He might have given them like frameworks on how to consult or advise people in any area of life or business, etc. Those types of things, right? A lot of things common in our business world is people are like, hey, like they've got blueprints for certain things. It's like I'm selling a blueprint on how to X, Y, and Z. In other words, they're selling their wisdom in a particular instance to how to get from A to B, step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And one of the things I commonly say is that in the kingdom, we need less blueprints and more frameworks. And I think that connects to this concept of wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. Because if you think about it, if you're somebody who's like, oh, I teach people how to do something in particular, right? This is the outcome that I'm helping people to get to. And how I'm doing it is because I've got this blueprint with all of these steps to take people through it. The problem with that is that it often lacks important context. Important context. You had one experience, and maybe you even had an experience with 10 other people. And therefore, that's where you got this blueprint where it's like, we do this, and then this always works. The problem is that if God's called you to people with multiple contexts, then if you don't have a framework, which takes a level of understanding, to have a framework for how to apply something so that then someone can have their own blueprint in the midst of that, then a lot of times we miss stuff. We miss a lot of stuff. And that's how people can walk a step-by-step blueprint and it not work for them, or have them take a step-by-step blueprint, but end up somewhere where it was nowhere where God desired to have them, if that makes sense. Right? I've seen this happen over and over again in a business context with business blueprints, in areas of weight loss or health stuff, where it's like, I've got your blueprint, but you don't have understanding. So you've got a blueprint that worked for you based off of this particular thing, but you don't have understanding of the context of this health stuff to be able to help people in the way that's going to help them, because you have wisdom on one path, one way in which to do something. Is that helpful?
Yeah, that's good. In my example, I'll take an example from the massage world. So if I tell
Great.
you that um, when you get a headache, it is because many times, if it's muscular in nature, it's because you have a dysfunction in your muscle, in one of your muscles, right? So I just told you that you have knowledge. Okay, so headaches stem from a dysfunction, right? But if I say, okay, now those headaches that you usually get, they usually stem from your pecs being out of whack and your neck being out of whack, right? So now you got more wisdom on, okay, which muscle group, right? But you don't have any understanding of how to work those muscles, right? But now if I give you more data points, let's say um, if you're working the neck, you want to use massage strokes to help alleviate the knots that's in the muscle. And if you can get rid of the knot, which is a trigger point, then that headache will go away, right? You have wisdom there, but you don't have an understanding of first of all, what methods do I use? What modalities do I use that work best on knots, right? So it's compounded over time with more understanding. So now if you have a knowledge of all the different massage strokes, you still don't have an understanding of which one to use to help that person get rid of the headache, right? But with more understanding, more time sat in that wisdom, steeping yourself in it, eventually you'll get the understanding. The most effective stroke that I can use to get rid of a knot is just static pressure on the place where the knot is, right? So now you can apply that. You have the knowledge point of, okay, there's a knot in this muscle. Let me find that knot. Let me use a massage stroke, and let me use this specific massage stroke and hold static pressure for 50 seconds, and it will probably release. And that person, the headache will potentially go away. So that's the way that understanding continues to work on the knowledge that you already have, and even the wisdom that you've gained, either from yourself or from somebody else. And I like to say that wisdom can be gained for free, but understanding can't be. You have to work for understanding. So to say more, like, if any man lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives liberally. So you ask God, God can give you wisdom. But what do you do with that wisdom? You're not going to get that without gaining understanding. And the way you gain understanding is meditating on the things that God has already spoke to you, applying what you've meditated on, and you'll get even greater levels of understanding. So the understanding part, I think a lot of people stop at wisdom because wisdom is easy enough to get. And you think
Mm,
you have everything you need when you have wisdom. But in all you're getting, make sure you get understanding.
that's really good. So you said that wisdom can be easy to get. There's wisdom that we get because some people wouldn't even catch that part, right? Because they're like, no, I've got wisdom because of all of my time and experience. That there is wisdom that you gain from time and experience. That's true. There's wisdom that you'll gain from others, from benefiting from others' time and experience. And there's wisdom that you can get, divine wisdom in an instant around something that you have very little knowledge of, even. You can supernaturally receive wisdom as well.
Mm-hmm.
There's even a spiritual gift called word of wisdom.
And there's a spiritual gift called word of knowledge.
Word of knowledge. Correct.
But there is
Right.
no word of understanding.
There is no, that's where I was headed.
I had that in my head too, so I'm with you.
There's no word of understanding. So what you're saying is that you can receive divine knowledge. You can receive divine wisdom or natural wisdom gleaned from your time and experiences, etc. But you said you have to work for understanding. So I want to can we unpack that a little bit more too? This whole you need to work for understanding.
Yeah, I think you have to work for understanding because understanding is not in a silo, right? Understanding is one of those things where it continues to gather things together. So if I understand how to stand as a child, eventually I gain balance from it, and I might have by mistake taken one step, right? And now I'm like, oh, I understand how to stand and keep my balance, but then I made a mistake and took that step, and if I keep practicing, keep playing around with understanding, or taking a step, eventually I'll understand how to walk. Okay, when I do like this, I need to. So it's like there's a compounding that happens with understanding. So if you're not working on continuing to put the pieces together, your understanding is always going to be limited. You don't really understand what you think you understand, and whatever
Mm,
understanding you have is limited, right? I feel like that's why people could know some things and they'll say something, and you can hear them say something, you be like, where you get that from? That's foolishness. Well, no, it wasn't necessarily foolishness. Their application hadn't come up enough to see all the other data points, right? They know this point, they know that data point, and how the word says knowledge puffs up. Because if you know data points and that's all you're relying on, you think you know something. And when someone tells you something that is contrary to what you already think you know, no, because this, that, and the other, right? But you don't realize that, oh, I have a limited set of data points. I don't have the whole picture, right? Wisdom is having enough data points where now you have a whole picture, right? But even if you have a whole picture, you have a picture of one thing, but you don't know how that picture interacts with the rest of the things that's happening in creation. But understanding will grab one piece of wisdom that is a picture and put it together with another piece of information that's a picture, and now you're like, oh, these things work in tandem. And then, and when I add this, this works in tandem, right? Understanding is gathering all the data points of knowledge and wisdom and helping you see a bigger, fuller picture, more and more, right? And you have to
right.
you have to work on it. It's always like, we're not always going to know the fullness of who God is, right? We have to
Right.
continually gather it, and understanding is just the process of continually gathering more and more so that you get a bigger picture, a clearer picture.
Right, because you can have the wisdom of knowing how to apply knowledge, but without the understanding, you don't have the fuller picture, which we're going to get to this in a second. 'Cause you said I think you said on the front end, it's a multiplier or something like that. So we'll get to that in a second. Um, Without that understanding, then you'll have wisdom on how to apply something perhaps in a particular context without a fuller understanding of a bigger picture that would help you to be able to multiply in terms of it serving a higher, broader, wider context.
Mhm.
Okay. So let's talk about this thing in terms of it being a multiplier. I mean, I just think about how important this is for anyone who is like, God's called me to a particular area of expertise, an area of service to others, whether it's in a medical facility as a practitioner, whether it's in business, helping people in a particular context, whether it's teaching inside of a ministry, a traditional ministry, inside of a church. Like, this is an important topic if you're talking about multiplying impact. So share some more around that.
Well, the example that came to mind, and I think that most people will be able to grasp this, is like a doctor, for example. Let's
Mm-hmm.
say I'm a kid, I'm growing up, and I just got wisdom from God. I'm supposed to be a doctor. I'm going to be a doctor when I grow up, right? And so at some point you can go to medical school, you can get all the basics that you need, but at some point there has to be a place where you're making the decision on what direction you're going to go with your medical degree, right? Um and if you're someone that doesn't like, if you don't understand yourself and you don't recognize that, I don't really like blood, right? I'm supposed to be a physician, but I don't like blood. How can I be a physician? I don't like blood. I guess I just can't be a physician. No, that's not true. There are certain physicians that don't have to deal with blood, right? And if you gain understanding about who you are and yourself, and what God says about you, or what he meant when he said you're going to be a physician, and you find exactly what you like and what flows easily to you and all the rest of that stuff, you might realize that, I like the ideal of helping people's shoulders when they get knocked out of whack, right? And so now, and I like cutting in the surgery. I don't have to touch the blood. I can use this or whatever, right? Then you'll find that, okay, that understanding applied to that means I could be this type of doctor. I'm not just a physician, period, because I can get myself pigeonholed in something that I would absolutely hate, you know? Or let's say you just know you're supposed to be in the medical profession and you don't like blood and you wind up doing phlebotomy. That's the people that draw blood and work in labs and stuff like that. You would be absolutely miserable. You probably faint every day. That's not applied wisdom and understanding about yourself, right? But hey, I don't have a problem with this or that. Now you can apply that understanding and you can find what fits you, and you won't have to worry about fainting.
So that's an interesting example because you're talking about getting understanding of yourself.
Hmm.
And and if you take that same concept that you're talking about before, which is that it's not like a instantaneous thing, it's something that you have to work towards. When you're talking about getting understanding of yourself, I guess the application of that is there's things that you're going to have to try, things that you're going to have to explore, look deeper into some things so that you can get which takes it's an investment of your time.
Hmm.
It's an investment of your time.
Yeah.
And so in any area that you are looking to gain understanding, it will be an investment of your time. Whatever the context is that you're looking to gain understanding in, whether it be an area, whether it be about yourself, whether understanding in some other relational context, understanding of somebody else, and understanding around something, around your work, a concept, a topic, or whatever, it's going to take an investment of your time.
Yeah, and your abilities as well. If you don't understand your abilities, then you'll find yourself trying to grind to do physician, but your brain don't even work like that. Like I knew that I wasn't going to be what was it? I think I was going to school for I was thinking about doing physical therapy. And I realized oh shoot, I have to take organic chemistry and I have to take this, and I already had an encounter with chemistry. And I'm like, and organic is a higher level. I'm like, I don't know. But I do know that I probably don't want to go this direction. That's a little too much organic for me. And so I was able, understanding myself and understanding my past, I was able to say, that's probably not it. But I still knew that I wanted to do something where I help people. I knew that it would be in the medical arena. At the time, I had no ideal, I had no knowledge about massage, and I had no knowledge about fully what a massage therapist does, right? But I kept, exploring things and gaining some understanding on certain stuff. And then I found myself in massage school. And then I'm like, oh, this, I get to do all the things I wanted to do, said I wanted to do. I get to help people. And I absolutely love this. But that didn't come all at once. That came over time. I know I want to help people. That's the first level of understanding I got when it comes to jobs, right? The next thing was I really do believe it's going to be kind of in a medical arena. I sensed that. I gained that level of understanding. And so then I had to explore, gaining on, putting more on top of that. It's not going to be physical therapy. Nursing, I can get away with the nursing. There's enough. So I was going that direction and I had a mishap, which I was going to have to wait a year to get into the nursing program. So at that point, I'm like, oh, by now I started hearing about this massage thing from other on my job when I'm working in security, and they're telling me about they love massage, and they're telling me about all the things that they get to do and whatever. So I gained understanding of what a massage therapist does a little bit. So I was like, that might work. And so I went and applied, and I got into massage school and experimented, and then I gained understanding that I actually really like this work. And so all those things were compound. That's me gathering a little bit about myself, gathering a little bit, gaining understanding about myself, gaining understanding about my ability, gaining understanding about the direction I think I'm supposed to go. Gaining understanding on, okay, I am stuck here right now. I have a whole year, so I can do something in this year that I have. Let me give this a shot, you know? And so understanding is constantly at work if you allow it to work.
Yeah. And so for what would you say is the sign that somebody has stopped at wisdom? What are some of the signs?
Some of the signs that you stopped at wisdom is if you think you understand stuff and you have language like you understanding in and of yourself, right? Like if you can say things definitively about certain stuff, that means that you think that you've come to some level of completion on a topic. And as soon as you do that, that's you leaning to your understanding. And if you're leaning to your own understanding, you're showing that you have blind spots about there's more. There's always more in the kingdom. There's always more that God wants to reveal. And so I think the if anyone could be seen leaning to their own understanding and thinking that they have definitive wisdom or knowledge about something, that's the key, that they're not going after understanding.
Hmm. But if someone, okay, I want to make sure I heard that right. So you were saying if someone speaks definitively around something, that I guess this is, so it's just a language thing. So if someone's speaking definitively around something, that if they find themselves doing that pretty consistently, like then it means that their posture is like, I already have all the understanding around
Yeah,
this.
it's like they're not giving space for anything else to come. And like I said, understanding is always gathering more intel, more information. So if you've stopped something right here, like, look, you can't tell me nothing about who Jesus is. I know everything there is to know about Jesus, right? If someone came like that, then you know that they don't know everything there is to know about Jesus, because the word says that even if there were, all the books in the world could not contain everything there is to know about him, which means that, okay, so you've stopped your level of understanding at, it's like, I got enough now. I got it. Right. And so
Well,
that's what will happen when you shut down understanding. You begin to think you fully have something, and you don't give space for a possibility that you could be wrong.
okay. So, I think choosing God is a really, really obvious example because I don't think people think like they have that. But pick like a area of expertise. Like when people are like, God's called me to expertise to master something, then a lot of times people are going to speak in with authority around the topic, whether they may or may not have like they may or may not even understand that they don't have understanding. I'm trying to help people see themselves, Phil.
Hmm.
So I'm saying if you feel called to an area of expertise to master something, to be an authority on it, and you're like, this is what I'm called to, how does one know? How does one know that they've stopped at wisdom versus understanding? I don't know if it's enough to say if you speak definitively, because you know what I'm saying?
Okay, I got
I'm
you.
trying to help people find
All
themselves.
right, this is hard for me, but
this
I'll use an example
is
from my.
you guys are getting this is how Phil, this is like Phil and my pillow talk. That's what's
Mhm,
happening
mhm.
right live right now. Go
Okay.
ahead, Phil.
So I'll give you what it's like for me. Let's say my profession. So
Okay.
when people come in and they have an issue going on, and I can tell them definitively, most times when this happens, it is because someone has this issue here, right? But the way I just set that up is I said most times, not all the times, not always, right?
Okay.
Although maybe in my experience, it's been 99.9% of the time.
Yes.
In my heart posture, I've already said I could be wrong here, but this is what I've seen, right? So if someone comes to me and say, "Yeah, you think you can fix this because blah blah blah," I don't say, "Oh yeah, I absolutely can fix you because I know when if I work on this, it's going to fix you. It's going to make you complete. It's going to make you whole." It's like, no, that's confidence, but that's arrogance as well. So I can speak confidently and I can say most times when this happens, this is because of this, and this is why this happens. So I'll use the example of the neck, headaches, all the rest of that stuff. So I would tell
Hmm.
I would tell a client, most times, headaches stem from muscle dysfunction. You know, it could be from blood pressure and stuff like that. But I've encountered even when people have high blood pressure and they're having a headache, they still get relief when I work on the muscles because it plays into it as well. So I'm not saying
Right.
that it's definitively because it's a muscle thing, but when I work on the muscles, usually it helps. So I'll see
Yeah.
what I can do. So that's how I've
Yeah.
already set it up, right? I can tell them while I'm working on them, hey, this pec here, you feel this muscle tightness here? That's a problem. And this is how it's causing a problem because it's tight, it's pulling you like this, and this is putting your neck on a tilt and blah. So I'm giving them confidently what I believe are
Yes.
potential things, and I'm giving them the data points to prove or as proof points that this is
Yeah.
why I'm thinking the way that I'm thinking. But
Yes.
I'm not posturing myself to be like, I absolutely know the answer, and this is absolutely it, right? I'm confidently telling them what I know. I'm ensuring them that I'm going to work on it, and we'll check in and see how things are going. Versus someone else could be in the same profession and be like, "Oh, you got this going on? Oh, I can fix that. I'm excellent at fixing that, right? And
Yeah.
I fix it all the time, right?" And so now they set themselves up as the absolute authority. They think they know exactly what it is, and they can work on it, and then the person don't get better. But because they think they know what it is, then what happens is the blame goes from, well, it's not me because I know exactly what I'm doing. So there's something else going on, and you're just strange. You're just weird, right? So that's the danger of like when you think that you really have all the answers and you know things definitively, and you're posturing yourself like you have the answer, is not going to leave space for when something shows up that's contrary. You're not going to recognize the data points that's saying there's something else at play here, right? Because you're so sure, from my understanding, everything I see, this has to be it, right? That's
Right.
why doctors could say to someone with a straight face, they could say, you know what? You have 2 weeks to live, right? When this happens, there's never been a case of someone having this disease and they've recovered from it. So,
Right.
unless a miracle happens or whatever. But there's something that they don't understand about the body or about faith or whatever the case is that could override that, right?
Yes. Okay, so this is what I'm hearing. So what I'm hearing is that this starts with a heart posture. This is really ultimately a heart posture. But the reason why you gave that example is because from that heart posture, often what comes from that is a habit of speaking definitively around all the things that are your area of either current or growing expertise,
And not making space for anything else.
and not making space for anything else, which means that even when you get understanding, so you and I, like, this is always our
Mhm.
posture, like there's always more in God, there's always more in God. So even when there's areas that we have understanding, we still, even with that understanding, don't believe that's all the understanding there is to get with it. And so even as you may have growing authority in an area because you have growing understanding, it still doesn't mean that there's not more. That's the thing when I talk about the power twins of confidence and humility. Like the power twins of confidence and humility. There's one thing to be confident, it's another thing to have humility, but when you have both of those together, it's really powerful. And when you're talking about multiplying and growing and serving all those things in the kingdom of God, if you have the combination of the confidence in what God, confidence in who God is, confidence in what He's placed inside you, confidence of the understanding that you've gleaned, confidence in the wisdom that He's given you. Cool, confidence, and the humility to know I don't know it all. I can't see it all. I only know in part. In God, there's always more. I can be wrong, and the combination of those things together is really, really powerful.
Mhm.
That's what this conversation is reminding
Yeah.
me of.
And another way that it shows up in me and my practice, for example, people will come in all the time. They ask me, well, what do you think about chiropractors? And I would say, well, I mean, what do you think? Do you think it'll work? And I will always put it back on them, right? Because at least the part that I understand is God can work on whoever in whatsoever way He wants, and He can use the foolish things to confound the wise. And
That's
so
right.
there are doctors that might say, ah, chiropractors, that's quacker practor, right? There's no
I've heard
real
that many
science base
times.
to it, right? But
Yes.
people go to chiropractors and they receive relief.
Yes.
Could it be the placebo effect? Maybe. So even if it's the placebo effect, who's to say that it won't work for that person, right?
Hmm.
And so because I have understanding that faith could work in whatever thing, I always say to them, what do you think? And if they say, I think it'll work, I was like, I think you should give it a shot then, right? Well, what about you? Do you get it? And then at that point, I'll tell them my faith, my thought process about it. I
Right.
think it works. I don't like to get my neck adjusted because there's too much sensitive mechanisms in there. And every time I get my neck adjusted, I wind up getting a headache. That's my data point. Don't mean that you're going to get a headache every time you get it. This is what
Right.
happens with me. So I'll go to a chiropractor. I don't like to have my neck adjusted, but if they adjust my back, I'm fine with it. So now I've been able to confidently speak about it, give them some insight from my life, but also give them space where, hey, give it a shot if you believe it's going to work, right? Because
Right.
I'm not the ultimate authority. I could be
Yeah.
keeping you from someone that's going to do a click clack, and all of a sudden you completely better because they actually have more understanding than just chiropractor work as well. Like I'm not putting them in the box of they're like every other chiropractor. Like no, who am I? I'm not God. I don't know.
Right. That's good.
Mhm.
That's good. I like this. Okay, so before I close this down, I feel like we've talked about this in enough ways that people can begin to like really ponder on, in what areas have I maybe stopped at wisdom? Or in what areas have I not necessarily, what areas have I not even considered that I don't have understanding yet? And those types of things, or who's thinking, well, but wisdom is the principal thing, but then forgetting about understanding,
Mhm.
right? So my prayer is that those things are being enlightened as people are listening and watching. But is there anything that we didn't talk about around this topic that you're like, hey, I want to make sure that folks hear this part too?
Yeah, I want to go back into the scripture, right? And I'm going to start at Proverbs 4. We'll read, we'll just read 6 through the end, and then I'll start breaking it down a little bit,
So
right?
we're back in
So
Proverbs
it
chapter
says,
4, right?
yep, 4,
Okay.
and starting at verse 5, right?
Okay.
Get wisdom, get understanding. Do not forget my words or turn away from them. Do not forsake wisdom, and she will protect you. If you love her, she will watch over you. So now we hear that wisdom is to protect and it's going to watch over you, right? So let me move on to verse 7. The beginning of wisdom is this: get wisdom. Though it costs you all you have, get understanding. So now understanding, we're going to talk about what understanding does. If you cherish understanding if you cherish her, she will exalt you. If you embrace her, she will honor you. So it's talking about exalting and honoring versus wisdom, which was protecting and watching over you. So there's like this multiplying effect there, right?
Mm.
Okay. And so she will, talking about understanding again, she will
Hmm.
give you a garland of grace, a
To
garland
grace.
to grace your head
Mhm.
and present you with a glorious crown. So
Mm.
if you're constantly going after understanding, eventually you're going to get a garland to grace your head. So what is a garland about, right? I went and I looked it up. What does garland have to do? Garlands on the head have to do with the Old Testament or with the Bible. And what I got was garlands a lot of times were used in joyous occasions, and they specifically mention coronations, right? So the people that attend, coronations, they would wear garlands, right? So if you're constantly going after understanding, you'll be placed in situations where you're in position of honor, right? You're
Mm.
around people that have great influence. And if you continue on in understanding, it says, "In present you with a glorious crown." So if you continue to go after understanding, eventually you'll be crowned, as a king, right? So I feel like if we stop at wisdom, a lot of times what we're doing is we're stopping before we can get to being in a position of honor that God is bringing you into, and also being crowned as a king in a particular area, because you haven't gotten enough understanding to get that responsibility.
Isn't it fun that both wisdom and understanding are called her?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You got to
No,
treat
this
them
no,
right. That's why. If you don't treat wisdom right, treat wisdom will flee. I don't need to take this. And if you don't treat understanding right, understanding will flee.
this was really good, babe. Really, really good. I love it. All right, so we'll end there. I think that's really good to end with that scripture. And again, that was Proverbs. We were reading from Proverbs chapter 4
Mm-hmm.
multiple times throughout today. I encourage you, listening and watching, to like read through Proverbs 4 and read it across multiple translations. I know I'm going to be doing that as well. I read it in maybe 2 or 3 different ones, and there's a few other translations that I want to go dig into around this too. I think it's super good. All right. So, Phil, I always let people shout out how they can connect with you more. So, let's see. It's like I could do your shout outs, but I'll let you speak for yourself. So, for those who want to connect more with you and what you're up to, what do they do, babe?
Tune into the Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur podcast. We're there almost every. Well, I'm there almost every week, right? And we're having more God conversations. So come join the conversation.
Very good. And so the Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur podcast, you can go to YouTube. We'll make sure to put all the links. You can go to YouTube, or if you are an audio only fan, you can listen in to the podcast on your favorite audio player. We'll make sure to link it up. Thanks, Phil, for joining me today. Appreciate you.
Thank you, love.